What's up? Are we muted? Can I hear you, David? Speak.
You can hear me, I assume.
Yes. So here we are, Mentality of Combat. It's super awesome that we can just go live and hang out with people and share these ideas. David Mullins, over there, sports psychology consultant. He's in Ireland. What town are you in Ireland?
In Galway. The
west coast of Ireland. David works with professional athletes, probably what, 75% combat athletes?
Yeah, 80%? Maybe even more. MMA fighters mostly, a few boxers, and then a few footballers, basketball players, and baseball players. But it's mostly fighters, yeah.
And you worked with some former champions and such. Often, this is a private relationship, coaching relationship, but sometimes they say, sure, talk about me, and you can. But as a rule, these are individuals that are still active, and not all of them want to discuss how they train and how they train combat mentality. Yeah,
some are kind of open about it, talk about the work we've done. Others don't want it out there. Maybe they don't want their opponents to kind of know about it or whatever it is. Like. But yeah, I've worked with, at this stage, multiple UFC champions and multiple champions in many organizations. So
yeah, super cool. And we talked, we're going to keep doing this. David and I have done podcasts together starting maybe 5 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
And it's kind of off and on, but at the same time, we build on a lot of the things. Hopefully we can do 20, 30 minutes today. We'll see what we can do based on time. But we're going to talk about Khabib and Justin, and we talked going into that one about how good Justin Gaethje looked in advance, but we'll talk about that in a second. I do want to talk about Douglas Lima versus Gegard Mousasi first, because that's coming up in 2 days. Have you? What are your thoughts on both of these guys?
So, for me, Lima might be the best guy outside of the UFC, and right up there with many UFC level guys. I think he's an absolute world class fighter. Who can hold his own. We know what Mousasi has done over the years. He's such a veteran at this stage in so many different organizations. So it's an incredible matchup. I'm just a fan of watching Lima. I'm a big fan of how that guy goes about his work, and some of the. I feel like he's in the form of his life now as well. So this is obviously a big test of middleweight against Mousasi, but I just like how Lima goes about his work.
Yes,
and just a joy to get to watch that guy.
If you're just joining us, we're going to talk about Khabib and Justin as well, but we're talking about Lima and Mousasi first. So I've talked a lot with Douglas Lima, and I've analyzed his work, and I actually have a Fight Secrets coming out. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure when it comes out. And I looked in depth at stuff. There's little moments in there, really super rare moments. And, I've watched tens of thousands of hours of fights in slow motion, from close, from far, in all different ways, backwards and forwards. There's the rarest of occasions where you can slow something down to the point that you can watch somebody whose body is already in motion. And while in motion, in the milliseconds, like a fastball hitter seeing a fastball, they see a threat and actually change the direction of their committed body swing by seeing, sensing, realizing what has to happen, and then having the ability to do it. And there's a couple of those in Douglas Lima, and it's super shocking when you see it in slow motion. It's like seeing magic. You're looking at like going, oh my fucking God, that guy's senses saw something, interpreted it, and then changed his motion in what appears to me to be in slowed down seconds, but at full speed is milliseconds. And it's wild to see him do that.
Yeah, and it's only possible to be able to do that if you've done years and years of high level training and if you're present in the moment mentally as well, that you can I guess see it coming, but it's almost different. It's like feel it coming, and you feel it. It's a little different in those moments, and you couldn't explain why and how, but it's automatic in terms of your training takes over, I guess, and your training is able to take over because of how present you are in the moment. It's flow state basically.
Yeah.
when you're able to do that kind of thing, where it feels like it's slowed down.
Yes. When I show these guys that, sometimes almost exclusively they didn't know they did it. Like you find these moments that, like, bro, that is so crazy. These two are interesting from a mindset standpoint. Gegard absolutely positively has said straight to me, and you can see it by looking at his fights. When he's on, he's so on. He's just the toughest fighter in the world to fight, and then some nights he's not on at all. And when you ask him about it, he's like, "Oh well, you know, that night I wasn't on." Like, we don't want that. And even like Gegard's beat the best in the world. He could beat Douglas and be the middleweight champion this weekend. But we don't actually want that from our athletes, right? We want them to know how and why they're on and not on.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's part of the fight is mentally being there, switched on, ready to go. It's not enough to say, well, it wasn't my night, maybe next time. That's part of the performance, is delivering a performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's part of the fight. And if you're not sure of whether you're going to show up or not, that's on you. And if you don't know afterwards why you didn't show up, that's on you. And that's on you to work on. That's like if you get caught with a shot and you know why you got caught with it, your hand was down or whatever, you'll work on that technically, but you should also be looking to work mentally on why you didn't show up, or why you're not sure if you will show up tonight.
One last thought on this, connected to flow and that ability to sort of feel it and adapt. I was talking to Juan Archuleta as he was going into the Pitbull fight and then the mixed fight. And I was talking to him about flow, being in flow. And he said something really fascinating to me, where he was like, I want to be so in flow that I'm out front of the flow. What does that mean to you when you hear that?
Well, I need to talk to Juan about it. Juan is an interesting guy. He after that last win, he credited Cub Swanson, who's a guy that is one of those guys who's open talking about the work together. You'd have to speak to Juan to know what he means by that exactly, to be out in front of the flow. What I would interpret it as, I would like to think it's a guy who doesn't just hope that he's in flow state, or just when it's on, he recognizes it. He's proactively trying to make it happen, and he's actively trying to get himself into that flow state. Which there are things you can do to make sure that not make sure, but give yourself a chance to flow. So that's what it sounds like to me. Yeah,
I took it to mean just, the way we were chatting, and then sort of, I took it to mean, what do they call that? Lucid dreaming. I took it to mean like that, where you're in it, but you actually are able to manipulate. So you're both allowing it to happen and being part of the state of flow, and the one at times able to manipulate it to some degree. That's what I took from him.
Yeah, so like you're aware you're in flow, so then you can utilize it best. I mean, we've all been there where you're performing and you're on fire. You're in the zone. You're switched on, whatever way you want to call it. Sometimes, like I remember playing football or different things. You're in that zone and you're like, I hope I don't fuck this up. I hope I don't fuck this up.
And you do.
And by worrying about it, you can take yourself out of that by becoming too conscious of how you're doing. But if you can just stay composed, stay relaxed, stay enjoying it, stay challenged, taking on that feedback, because that's part of flow, is feedback, actively getting feedback and taking feedback on. So I guess that makes sense what Archuleta is saying in terms of if he's receiving feedback and he's processing it really quickly and really well and accurately, and he's able to do more with it, then it just spirals upwards. A better place. I've lost you, Robin. I don't know if everyone else can hear me, but
you disappeared for a second, but you're back.
Okay.
One other thing, Lima, and I've heard this from many, many fighters, and so have you, and maybe it's just my brain is making a connection where there is none, but I find often when I hear really high-level guys talk openly about how frightened they are a day before or 2 days before the day, it seems to be a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
But Lima's one of those guys. Yeah, he will talk openly about how terrifying it is to fight.
Yeah, I've heard him say that several times, and Like I remember heading into the rematch with Rory McDonald. He was talking about that kind of stuff, and that's, to me, that's a good thing. That like, what's he trying to hide? All of them are feeling it. Every single one of them, even the ones who pretend they're not feeling it, they're all feeling it. I know for a fact they are. So he's got nothing to hide. He's just being honest about it. Some people are more open about that stuff. Some like to hide it. Some pretend they're not feeling it, but they're all feeling it. And how open they are about it, that's on them. I remember one of my former fighters, Chris Fields. Well, he's planning a fight this year, so he's still active. He's a coach as well now in Dublin. He said, and famously, and he said it publicly, like the morning of the fight, he wouldn't mind if he got hit by a bus, so he didn't have to do the fight that night. Like it wouldn't be the worst. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he got hit by a bus, so he doesn't have to do it. This is a guy who's put months and months of preparation in, made the weight last night, woke up, it's fight day, and he's like, wouldn't be the worst thing. And that's just, he knows what that is. It's just part of the experience, and you go past that then, and you stay on track, and you make the walk, and you go in there and you perform. But that's part of the experience. They're all feeling it in some way, and him as a guy who talks about that fear and that those nervousness and that doubt and all that stuff that he feels in the build up. So he's going to be feeling it against Mousasi for sure. But Mousasi's going to be feeling it as well. Mousasi's a guy everyone thinks is super cool, super calm, but he's feeling all that stuff.
He's still human. He's still human.
Yeah. Don't get it twisted. He's feeling all that stuff as well.
He's a monster, though. I love both of these guys. I hate the idea that one of them will lose. Like what happened on Saturday. Khabib, Justin, going into it, we talked a lot. We actually did a mentality of combat just on Justin Gaethje, not on the fight, on Justin, and how many of the things appeared that he was doing were correct. Justin Gaethje lost that fight. In fact, going into it, we were like, I would be so surprised to see him just shell up, not pull the trigger, end up on the ground, and get manhandled. Let's recap. Sorry, we went out there for a second.
Yeah.
Let's recap what we thought, recap what we learned, and recap where the thinking may have been flawed, or is it just Khabib performed so brilliantly? Let's go through it.
So what we thought was going to happen, what I was pretty confident in, was we know Justin is going to show up. We know he's going to bring a performance. That's what I was so sure of that, because that's what we've always seen from him. He's always brought a performance. He's lost twice, but it wasn't because he didn't show up and perform on those nights. Eddie Alvarez beat him in a war, and Dustin beat him with a big shot at the start of the fourth round, or whatever round it was, where Justin had been on top just before that. So he had performed every time. I was sure he was going to perform, and hearing all the right stuff from him in the build-up, I was really confident in him showing up. And I thought he had the style to beat Khabib. I said it openly that I thought this was Khabib's toughest test. Turned out not to be. And I hate to say this, and Justin might admit it himself, he did not perform to his best on that night. So some of that's to do with Khabib, maybe less so Khabib and what Khabib was doing in the fight, and a lot of it to do with Khabib and who he is and what he can possibly do, and the potential of Khabib can kind of cause a guy to take himself out of his own game, because it seemed a little frantic from Justin. I mean, I'm sure if he had it back over, he would do it differently and all that stuff. But it
doesn't matter.
And he always wants to create that kind of damage and chaos, and he always wants it to be a wild fight. But it was a little different. It seemed like it was frantic, and it was rushed, and even between rounds, Trevor Whitman's telling him to slow it down, because he could tell he was almost gassed at the end of the first round because of how frenetic and how panicked it was, and he was landing some shots for sure, and he was being effective, but it just felt like it was happening at a pace that Khabib was comfortable with, because he was just kept coming forward, and you knew that the potential there for him to take him down. He took him down at the end of the first round. So it's that kind of it's like Khabib is like a vice that's closing on you, and it's slowly closing, and That's the way it felt. That's the way it felt during the fight. That even though it was frenetic and frantic and high paced,
Yeah.
but it just felt like Khabib was slowly squeezing that
Yeah.
vice.
Well, and you feel on the other end of that you're just hanging on, even when nothing bad has happened in those first 4 minutes. You have this feeling that you're just hanging on, and it's really hard and it's stressful. But again, like, it's really important that people understand. I think when these things come up, that is all due to Khabib, even if the all is a reputation that Khabib has built for himself through all of his other fights. That's still him. He did that. I've really been fascinated now. So, do you know what a second order chaotic system is? If you start reading chaos theory, a second order chaotic system is actually a system that just by talking about the system, it changes it. So even just, and talking doesn't have to be the only thing, being aware, it's feedback based on what you think of it. So Khabib isn't just Khabib. Khabib's changed based on what you think of him. And that's fighting. Fighting. I mean, you know how many feints Conor had to throw, fake left hands to set up the left head kick? 0. Didn't need any. Faraz Zahabi and Robin Black and Joe Rogan set that kick up for him. You know, all his other left hands set that kick up for him. His reputation created that kick. And some of that was Khabib. But also Khabib, I found, was even more agitated himself than normal. Did you find that?
Yeah,
he was in better shape. And it might have been a stress to Khabib, but a stress to Khabib created a stress Justin. I watched it again a couple of times. It's actually a fucking fascinating fight. It's a fascinating fight.
It was really wild. It was wild while it lasted. But I just felt like Khabib just kept coming forward, kept pressuring in his unique way of doing that. And the threat is always there. So the threat of that takedown and that control and that dominance is always there.
And what it means, what the takedown means. The takedown doesn't mean I might get taken down. The takedown means, oh my God, I might be on the bottom getting smashed.
By Khabib.
By Khabib, right?
It's by him and only him who can do it that way, like where it's that Khabib way of doing it. So it is absolutely incredible to watch the pressure, and it's it was wild while it lasted. Both guys
stressful,
swinging wildly and highly stressed, but I just felt like it was that kind of vice where he keeps coming forward. He's relentless with that. And when he got that takedown at the end of the first round, I was like, oh no, he's going for the armbar. I thought it was because there's so little time on the clock, but I think he thought it was there. And then he went so quickly, and the second takedown, he went to that similar kind of setup for the angle, obviously. But I think he knew there was an advantage there as well, so he was he was able to do that. And one thing on Khabib, how cool was it to see the emotion pouring out of him after the fight? Because he was carrying that stuff in with him, carrying that with him all through the training camp, all through the time in Fight Island, all through the walkout, the introductions. That stuff is heavy in his heart. And then he's able to perform, and then he pours it all out. It was all there, though. It was all raw emotion that he was able to perform with, which was very impressive, I think.
Remember when he went flying over the cage to attack, what's his name?
Dylan Dennis.
Dylan, that's the same thing. It just all poured out of him. It was just a different emotion that day. It was a different emotion that 6-month period. It was anger and frustration and hatred and vengeance and all of that. But it was the same thing. Cold, cool, let it out in the fight and then let it out after. This one was a different emotion, but it was the same process, it seemed to be. Yeah,
it's correct, because the first thing he did after Conor tapped is he stood over him, talked over Conor a little bit, and then he walked across the cage and started talking shit to Dennis because he wanted him to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And he wanted to tell him that for a long time.
Yeah.
So he was
able
to control that. Yeah, he was able to control that in the build up and control it fight week, and then during the performance itself, and then it, like you said, it pours out.
But
it's impressive. I'm just sad he's going to retire now. Happy for him, but sad for us as fans that we to see another Khabib performance.
There's one really big thing I think and it's applicable to his mind and performance and skill, but everything. And hey, it's not my role to try to say who's the best or the not best or the best ever. I don't that stuff to me is just, those are fun games to play, but they're not important. But I'm not purposefully trying to compare Khabib to John Jones or trying to criticize John Jones here. But one thing Khabib does that we don't see from Jones, we don't see from Khabib, gets fucking way better every time. That was way better. He was slit in better shape than he'd ever been because he needed that fitness. So he worked his brains out to be fit enough to create. Because what if he had to do that high pressure thing for 4.5 rounds or 5 rounds? Yeah. He wanted to be in shape. So he created the body and the physicality he needed to be able to do that performance in that state, believing it. Like, he was better. That was the best ever. And that's the other thing. You could, how would Justin have done against Khabib, who fought Conor 2 years ago? Well, we don't know. Because that wasn't that Khabib. It was uber Khabib. It was super Khabib. It was another 2 levels up of Khabib. It was Khabib who, on the last performance of his lifetime in memory of his father, did everything he could possibly do to be greater than he could have ever been before. That's why we watch it. Like, that's why I watch it, to see that, Yeah,
it's special.
Yeah, but he was better than he's ever been too. And it's very easy, I think, sometimes when you're looking at things to, oh, look how much Justin has improved. Look how much, the guy or woman trying to beat the great has improved. And we said this on the last thing, we must assume that the great improved too. And in this case, and history won't always say that. History will never say that, because history isn't paying attention in the growth moments. But it's true. That was that Khabib in that moment was brilliant, and even more brilliant than we've seen him.
Yeah, I think part of it is because he did feel a threat from Justin, so he felt like he needed to be at his best. I think he wanted to honor his late father, and maybe he knew this was, like, maybe he was comfortable with the idea well in advance. This is his last one, so he wanted to put everything into it. We talked last week about being all in or not in at all for an event like this, where there's so much emotion going in. He was definitely all in terms of preparation. The weight cut and all the stuff that was talked around the making weight, but he made the weight.
It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah, exactly. He was incredibly fit, incredibly sharp mentally, and like we said, part of the reason Justin didn't perform to his best was because Khabib was doing that to him.
Yes, that's right.
And not allowing him to get settled. Like, Justin never settled really, but that's a lot to do with Khabib's vice-like pressure not allowing you to settle.
Yeah, true. So true. It was beautiful. It really was. And, it's funny when I talk to certain people and I say, well, you never know, 2 years later. Oh, I talked to George St. Pierre yesterday for a bit. And I said, how are you? He goes, oh, pretty good for a guy who probably lost $10 million, meaning that he retired. But George is getting older, but he's always in shape. But they could still fight. And people will say, oh, Khabib's family is so important to him. He made that promise. Promises change. The feeling of your mother changes. Your feelings change. You could sit down and have
his mom might feel bad for him sitting at home.
That's right. She's allowed to change.
I'd rather, yeah. So we've seen it before. We've seen people make promises like that, and then they keep going. There's several examples. So who knows what can happen? But I just for me, fighter retirement is another issue that never gets talked about in the way that I'd like it to be talked about, coming from a sports psych perspective, where some fighters don't hang it up when they should, and they stay too long because they feel like they still have it or they still want to do it and all this kind of stuff. So I want fighters to be clear-minded when they're making that decision to step away from the sport. And if that is their decision, then they should be allowed to make it on their own terms and be confident, be comfortable in it. And fans will always want more. That's the problem. Some people bought that Tito Chuck fight. Some people paid money to watch that. I don't know, maybe 11 people, but still, some people paid to watch that fight. And so people will always pay. People are so excited to watch Roy Jones and Mike Tyson. So the fans will always want to watch the big names fight again. That's always
doesn't mean they should. Doesn't mean they should.
I want fighters to be comfortable with the decision they make and able to step away and face new challenges then.
I remember, so Paulie Malignaggi is a friend, and you came up as a big fan of his, and I remember you telling me you saw him write this thing about why he was coming back because there was this deep desire, and then you said that's not enough. That will be there at 60 and 70, and you're right.
Uh-huh.
I have that, and I fought at a low level. I wish I was gonna fight tonight, and when the fight week is there, and I see these guys and they're going through it, I'm so jealous, and I wish I could have that experience again. And I'm 51. And I'll feel that way when I'm 60. So it will always be there. That is inherently not a reason to fight.
No, it's part of there's very few fighters in the world. There's a lot of fans that watch it, but like if you think of I often say this to fighters heading into an event. If you think of the card the last day at UFC 254 or heading into Mousasi and Lima, there's going to be, I don't know how many fights on the card, 10 fights or whatever on the card. So that's 20 fighters. And there's going to be millions of people watching those 20 fighters perform. And those people will only watch the main event or the co-main and the main. So it might be 4 fighters or 2 fighters with millions of fans. The ratio is off. The ratio is crazy how different it is.
If 800,000 people watched Lima versus Mousasi for the main and co-main, and there were 4 fighters, that would mean 200,000 people per single fighter.
So
to fighter.
Yeah, so the ratio is off. So therefore, like fighter compared to general public, the ratio, like there's something special about a fighter that'll actually do it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That's that thing that's special about them, that fire or whatever you want to call it. That's not going away just because they're done now or physically they're done. That fire that made them compete in the first place, that'll keep burning. That'll still be there. That's why a lot of them stay involved in the sport or as coaches or different things like that, or remain fans even when it's over, and always feel like they can still do it and all this kind of stuff. It's why it's so hard for certain guys like BJ or people like that to step away from it, because inherently he is a fighter. He is a fighter. That's part of his makeup.
We lost me. Oh, you're back.
That's part of what makes BJ Penn is that he is a fighter. That's who he is. That's part of what he is. That's why it's so hard for him to step away. And that's why I feel like that when a fighter does retire, like we've seen some big names retire this year now. DC has stepped away, and Khabib has stepped away, and some other big names have hung it up. And I always think, good for them. If this is what they really want to do and they're happy and they can close that chapter, good for them, great for them. The fans will always clamor for more. That's what fans do, but it shouldn't be about that. It has to be a decision that you're happy with and that you can move on and excited for new challenges.
Friends, you were gone for a moment, but you're back. Let's wrap it up. That was a really good chat. I know it's your birthday on Thursday. Thursday is Lima versus Mousasi. Will you be around? Well, you're locked down in Ireland, right? You'll be around home.
Yeah, I'll be
pop
home,
in for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll pop in for a little bit and we can hang out and talk about that one, because I'll be up watching it. So that's a really good fight.
What time is that on usually? So if it's 8 p.m. in New York City, what time is it in Ireland?
So our clocks went back last weekend. You guys didn't, right?
That's right.
So there's a 4-hour gap now, which is better for me.
Okay.
There's always that little window.
Yeah.
Where you go back and you don't, where things are better for me to watch fights and watch stuff. So it's midnight then when it's 8 in New York.
Okay.
It's midnight. Yeah.
That means we'll see. I'm going to request to see if I could get Michael Venom Page during Lima versus Gegard. I'm going to send the request into Bellator and see, because I love Mike. I'm one of his biggest fans as somebody who studies his work, and he's a really great dude. People don't get to know Michael Venom Page too well, and they make assumptions about what he's like, but he's a great dude. So I'm going to send a request in now. So if he's here, he'll be able to say hello on your birthday.
Awesome. That'll be cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Hopefully we get together next Tuesday and do this again. I'll be on time. I'm sorry I was late. I was working out. I have a Muay Thai coach coming to train, a couple that come and train with me here in Edmonton, which is super. I'm living large here. I get to have private training with high-level coaches, so it's great.
That's cool. Thanks. I got to run around a GA pitch. Not the same.
Yeah. Well, happy birthday, friends. Thanks for watching. Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get to your questions this time. Last time I put up pretty much everyone. This time I didn't hit the question thing, the comments thing, until I realized there were like 100.
They're going to be so pissed off. They're going to be so pissed off.
There was like 100. Winstar. Oh, I hope I'm coming there. Oh, this is nice. He channels his grief into focus and will on the Marcus, George, Lampley. We got a lot of people popped in and said hello. I'm sorry I didn't get to your questions and thoughts and ideas. But next time we will. And Thursday during the show, I'll be up on all these same platforms, wherever you're watching this. We'll do Lima versus Mousasi watch party. David Mullins, sport psychology consultant, and my friend, thank you for hanging. Let's do this next week.
See you later.
Blackout.